Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jerome Delay, and I'm the head of the Entertainment Division at Twin. And I am delighted to introduce our next Media Mastermind keynote speaker, Chief Executive Officer of National Geographic Global Networks, Courteney Monroe. We all know National Geographic for its superb documentaries and factual programming. Today, we are going to hear about the company's strategy into the scripted content and how National Geographic is turning factual events into high-end drama that is thrilling audiences around the world. Courteney Monroe's keynote will be followed by a panel led by journalist and author Martha Raddatz, whose book inspired The Long Road Home and some of the main talents from Nat Geo's exceptional dramas. This includes noted filmmaker Peter Kosminsky, executive producer of the four-part event series The State, which focuses on the Islamic State, and actor Michael Kelly, starring in The Long Road Home about the events of the Black Sunday ambush of US forces in Baghdad. This will be a fascinating dive into some of the smartest TV available today. And now, please join me in welcoming Courteney Monroe.
Good morning, everyone, or at least I think it's morning. I've taken 2 overnight flights in the past 4 days and pretty much didn't sleep at all last night, so I have no idea what day it is or what time it is, so please bear with me. That being said, I love nothing more than to start a presentation with a video narrated by the amazing Morgan Freeman. I wish he could be here with us in person, but he is actually on a press tour for our series, The Story of Us, with Morgan Freeman. Thank you, Jerome, for that kind introduction, and I want to thank Reed Meadham and the MIPCOM team for inviting me to speak this year. This is the first ever National Geographic keynote presentation, and I am extremely honored to be here, and the timing is not lost on me. You see, 2 years ago, we set out on a brand new journey at National Geographic Channels to elevate our content with premium, high-quality, wildly entertaining programming in both factual and scripted drama. And what an exciting journey it has been. For me, the realization that our transformation is truly taking hold took place last week when I found myself standing on the massive stage at the Hollywood Bowl in Los Angeles in front of a crowd of more than 15,000 people for the premiere of our upcoming feature documentary, Jane, about the life of Jane Goodall. The experience was both exhilarating and totally terrifying. Along with Jane Goodall herself, we screened our documentary from Oscar and Emmy-nominated filmmaker Brett Morgen with a live 78-piece orchestra playing the breathtaking Philip Glass score. It was an experience I will never forget and a moment that truly exemplified today's Nat Geo. As we all know, the television business continues to dramatically transform. The landscape is shifting beneath our feet at breakneck speed. From peak competition to rapidly evolving distribution, there is simply no way to survive without being exceptional. So at Nat Geo, we are shaking things up, radically so. Our strategy today is informed by the notion that more isn't always better. Instead, better is better. And for us, that now means fewer, bigger, bolder programs that are distinctive, that are exceptional, and that are worth paying for. And it includes adding scripted drama to our portfolio in a meaningful and impactful way. This new programming strategy marks a bold and radical departure for us. And just 1 year into its launch on air, we are already accomplishing much of what we set out to do, including working with best-in-class creative talent, significantly raising our profile in the industry and among consumers, and driving audience globally with creatively excellent and entertaining content that is closely aligned with our brand. In a very short amount of time, we have become a port of call for some of the best in the business. The creative talent we now have associated with our programming is nothing short of extraordinary. In fact, in just the past year alone, we took on climate change with Leonardo DiCaprio in Before the Flood. We went to Mars with Brian Grazer and Ron Howard. We started a gender revolution with Katie Couric. We explored God with Morgan Freeman, and we celebrated genius with Geoffrey Rush. I am proud to say that 3 of those shows I just mentioned rank as our top 3 series of all time, and all are for sale by our Fox Networks Group content distribution team. The Story of God with Morgan Freeman, Mars, and Genius. I am extremely proud of what we've accomplished and incredibly excited about what lies ahead. But at National Geographic, our dedication to premium content goes way beyond just television, and so does our success. Our distinguished magazine grabbed its first ever Pulitzer nomination this year for their issue dedicated entirely to gender. And we have a massive and unrivaled presence in social media. We are the #1 most followed brand in social, and the #1 non-celebrity account on Instagram. Watch out, Kim Kardashian, I am coming after you. In every area of our business, we are focused on living up to the promise and expectations of our extraordinary brand. You see, for 130 years, National Geographic has been igniting the explorer in all of us. Through groundbreaking storytelling from the best and brightest explorers, photographers, and filmmakers in the world, we have used the power of our yellow border to take our audiences to places only National Geographic can bring them. We're demonstrating how you can take a revered and iconic brand and through innovation, give it a completely modern and entertaining twist. The difference between brands that endure and those that decline is that one is busy living while the other is simply obsessed with not dying. At National Geographic, we are living out loud and we are thriving. Today, we reach a global audience of nearly 750 million people every single month through our extensive media portfolio, providing them with a deeper understanding of the world we share and their role in it. The amazing woman we honored last Monday night at the Hollywood Bowl, Jane Goodall, once said, "Only if we understand will we care. Only if we care will we help. And only if we help shall all be saved." We take those words very much to heart at National Geographic and believe passionately in creating entertainment with purpose. And that purpose drives us to return 27% of all of our proceeds to the nonprofit National Geographic Society, helping to fund nearly 500 grants per year for conservation and exploration. Storytellers are our lifeblood at National Geographic, which brings me to the specific topic that I want to speak to you about this morning, our scripted programming strategy and the amazing storytellers with whom we are partnering. People often ask me what scripted looks like at National Geographic, and with such a glut of content in the market, why in the world is National Geographic even bothering with scripted? Those are both very legitimate questions, especially in a world with more than 500 scripted series premiering this year in the United States alone, and at my best count, more than 10 times that globally. My colleagues at 21st Century Fox in Turkey alone produce 600 hours of scripted a year. It's simply staggering. And yet I hope this morning that you will leave with a clear sense of why, in spite of all that, scripted makes sense for us and how we plan to distinguish ourselves in the space. First, we have zero ambitions to become a fully scripted network. Exactly the opposite, in fact. We remain at our core a factual network that will continue to produce documentaries on globally urgent topics ranging from climate change to the crisis in Syria and even space exploration, as we do in our hybrid factual scripted series Mars, which returns for a second season this spring. In fact, we also have a team here this week looking for factual acquisitions to complement our new strategy. But as we transform ourselves into one of the world's leading destinations for premium content, fully original scripted series can and should play a role on our network. But the way in which we are approaching scripted is highly selective and curatorial. First, it's worth noting that our scripted team, led by Carolyn Bernstein, whom you will meet in just a moment on our panel, is based on the Fox lot in Los Angeles, in the heart of the entertainment community, providing us direct access to the very best talent and showrunners in Hollywood. And when it comes to National Geographic scripted programming, we have a very specific filter in mind. We are looking for drama that is distinctive and premium and globally appealing. Drama that is entertaining first and nutritious second. Drama that is resonant, muscular, and urgent, and from, as I said, the very best creative minds working in entertainment today. And finally, and I think most importantly, drama that is fact-based and authentic. I often joke, you will never see dragons on National Geographic Channel because they don't exist. Although I would happily take the success that HBO has achieved with their dragons. Here's a quick look at some of our recent work in scripted. So as you can hopefully see, our vision is built on quality and distinctiveness, and the belief that entertaining and smart are not mutually exclusive. Before we get to our panel, I would like to touch on 3 specific scripted projects that we have here at the market: Genius, The State, and The Long Road Home. If you want to play the long game, you've got to chase the big bets, which is exactly what we did with our very first scripted series, Genius. It was an entirely new way of doing business for us. It started with Brian Grazer and Ron Howard of Imagine Entertainment bringing us a beautiful script based on Walter Isaacson's New York Times best-selling biography of Albert Einstein, which immediately attracted Geoffrey Rush, one of the few people ever to have won the Triple Crown of acting, an Oscar, a Primetime Emmy, and a Tony. By the time the series was over, the first ever scripted series to come out of National Geographic Channel had snagged 10 Emmy nominations, including Best Limited Series, Best Leading Actor for Geoffrey Rush, and Best Director for Ron Howard. The only other 2 networks with shows nominated for Best Limited Series were HBO and FX. 2 networks who have been playing the scripted game at the highest level for decades. So even though we did not make it onto the Emmy stage that night, I most certainly felt as though we had won regardless. Genius not only resonated in the industry, but it resonated with viewers as well. It was the most watched series in National Geographic history. It drove on-demand performance to all-time highs, serving as our single highest performing show ever in nonlinear. It attracted one of the most upscale, educated, and wealthy audiences in our history, which helped drive advertising rates 4 times higher than the network average. It also attracted a ton of new viewers. In fact, over 60% of the audience across the globe was new to National Geographic. And Genius's global social media reach generated 567 million impressions and 92 million video views. But the real testament of success often comes from really unexpected places. So if you will indulge me, I want to read you a short letter that one of our writers, Noah, received out of the blue from a biochemist at the Weizmann Institute in Israel. It reads, "Dear Noah, just a quick note to say that lots of real scientists are being inspired by Genius. Everyone in my biochemistry lab at the Weizmann Institute in Israel has been watching the episodes at home with friends and family and then talking all day in the lab about their favorite scenes. My husband and I pause the show every few minutes to fill in, for the benefit of the kids, the historical context and peripheral characters which are so lightly and gracefully touched on. Or to wax enthusiastic on Einstein's insights, which of course we knew the details of already, but are having so much fun being re-exposed to in this way. You have no idea how rare it is that I would praise anything developed for television. So please be flattered that we think your work is awesome. Sincerely, Debbie Fass, Department of Structural Biology, Weizmann Institute of Science. The funny thing was that Debbie didn't even know how to reach Noah, but she took a chance and she typed his name with a Gmail address, and lo and behold, it actually reached him. I think Debbie perfectly captured how we hope and envision that our scripted content will resonate with audiences around the world. I'm incredibly excited about season 2 of Genius, which will feature Antonio Banderas playing the title role of Pablo Picasso. Carolyn will be on stage shortly and can share with you more on what to expect from season 2, along with Eugene Simon, one of our stars from season 1. Now, we followed up Genius with a bold and provocative miniseries event, which premiered last month from acclaimed writer-director Peter Kosminsky. A compelling fictional story based on extensive and meticulous research, The State follows 4 young British men and women who have left their lives behind to join ISIS in Syria. The State is a raw, gripping, and unflinching drama that provides unique, never-before insight into the harsh reality of life inside ISIS. It is not a story anyone but Peter could do justice to, and we were honored to partner with him. The reviews were tremendous. Stuart Clark from Variety said, "The State is one of the most interesting television projects to be released this year," while Parade called it absolutely gripping. Peter will be joining us in a few minutes to tell you more about the show and elaborate on the impressive project, how it came to fruition, and the extensive research that he did before he even attempted to write a script. The Long Road Home is the last series I want to discuss, which will be premiering globally next month. It is based on the New York Times bestselling book by internationally acclaimed journalist Martha Raddatz. And The Long Road Home tells the true story of Black Sunday, when a small platoon of army soldiers were ferociously ambushed in Sadr City, Baghdad, in April of 2004. 8 soldiers would make the ultimate sacrifice that day, and more than 65 would be seriously wounded. This 8-hour series offers viewers an intimate window into the experience of war, as seen through the eyes of the soldiers themselves, as well as their families back home. The soldiers profiled are ordinary rank-and-file guys, not the elite fighting machines who are so often portrayed in television and film. These soldiers literally go from driving minivans at home on one day to a life-or-death combat situation they were totally unprepared for the next. It is an adrenaline-fueled and very emotional journey about the universal and global experience of war. TV Guide has already dubbed the series truly must-see. Our cast is incredible, including Michael Kelly, Jason Ritter, John Beavers, Kate Bosworth, Sarah Wayne Callies, and Jeremy Sisto. Michael and our executive producer, writer, and showrunner, Miko Alan, will be joining us shortly to tell you more. We are incredibly proud of our new premium, creatively ambitious programming. And I hope that you agree that when it comes to scripted drama specifically, we have found our voice in the landscape with authentic, entertaining, and powerful stories that resonate globally and that live up to the promise and expectations of the National Geographic brand. I am tremendously excited about where Nat Geo is headed and hope that when you meet with my colleagues at Fox Network's group content distribution team, you will be as well. It has been a true honor to be here this morning. Thank you so much for inviting me. And it is now my great pleasure to ask the panel to please join me on stage, along with ABC News Global Affairs correspondent and New York Times bestselling author, the amazing Martha Raddatz, to moderate our discussion.
We could just get very cozy here. We're also happy to be here, and I am a completely objective journalist like some of you out there, and I will just say that what National Geographic is doing is really, truly astonishing. I'd like to welcome the panel, who Courtney introduced a little bit, Peter Kosminsky, who is the director of the State, Sam Otto, one of the actors who plays a British man who joins ISIS, my friend Miko Alan, who is the screenwriter, showwriter, and executive producer of The Long Road Home, that guy there, Michael Kelly, who plays the lead. He plays Lieutenant Colonel Gary Valesky, and Eugene Simon, who plays the son of Albert Einstein, and the great Carolyn Bernstein. It's why we're all here. She heads scripted content for National Geographic Channel. And Peter, I want to speak to you and Miko first. And I just want to, because you've had so much in shaping these programs, I just want you to talk about how you balance the authenticity and the entertainment. Peter, if you'll start.
I don't think anyone's ever accused me of being entertaining. The difficulty is when you've got a vast amount of research and you have to try to distill it into something that people are prepared to sit and watch. At the same time, you have an obligation to the research not to be misleading, not to misrepresent it. I'm sure you had exactly the same experience in your work. So you have something like 18 months of research gathered by a pretty impressive team, and somehow you sit down, just like every writer does, with a blank page and try to distill that into something that people are going to watch.
And Miko?
I mean, I think in our case, especially because we use the real names of all the soldiers and family members, I think the expectation that the audience has is that what you're going to see is true. You know, we have it, you know, every dramatic program carries a disclaimer that some events have been dramatized, but I think the balance is the level of dramatization and what you choose to change for purposes of drama, because obviously life doesn't unfold in an 8-hour television structure. So I'm always mindful of the fact that the real life people are going to be watching this, and where we can't maybe literally capture what happened, it still needs to be thematically and ethically true to the experience.
Which is really difficult, I mean, particularly that because they're still alive. You still have people on active duty in the Army, Michael's playing, for instance. And I want to talk to the actors, and Michael, start with you on that. How big a challenge was that for you, because you have the real guy kind of looking over your shoulder who's now a lieutenant general?
It was a big challenge and a great responsibility to take on someone who is, you know, his men consider him God. And I, through the research that I did and, you know, reading the scripts, reading the book, watching the interviews on this great man, I had put him on this pedestal that was very high in the sky. And then when I finally got to meet Gary Valesky, I put him on one even higher. And, you know, all of his men, I think for me, the toughest part was, like you said, these are people who are still alive. And I met a lot of his men who served under him. And, you know, the first time they met me, they looked at me with disdain. They were like, this is Michael Kelly, he's playing Gary Valesky. And they were like, good luck, buddy. You know, so it was like this, you know, you felt a great responsibility to do this man justice, you know.
And Eugene, playing the son. I'm sorry. Yes.
I was playing the character.
Yes.
I was playing my character. Well, I mean, my character to change it entirely as the character of Edward Einstein on Genius. I mean, this was a very interesting character and a very interesting, almost concept to me, because really, Edward's storyline as a young man raised by someone who had such eminence, even, you know, early into his life, it was a very difficult thing for him to experience. And my curiosity, my fascination with the character came from the fact that he really has this. He gives a sort of commentary on Albert Einstein that is really kind of unique, because he's a young man who has essentially been neglected from a very, very young age by someone the world considered to be one of the most renowned, if not extraordinary men that's, you know, ever of the 20th century, and yet he perceived him to be, frankly, something of a monster. He felt neglected, he felt unwanted, and he was also, you know, suffering from very, very heavy bouts of schizophrenia at a time when the treatment for that sort of illness was incredibly left a lot to be desired. So as far as a character that I felt a huge sense of responsibility, because he has such an intimate relation to the underlying emotional issues of a man like Albert Einstein, and that was a huge there was a lot of there was a strong duty to be as authentic to his experience as possible. I invite you, by the way, if you want to see a very powerful image of the character that I play, Edward Einstein, in his later life. I mean, quite simply, just type it into Google and go onto images, and you'll see this extraordinary image of this man, I would say probably in his late 40s or so, who is sat in a restaurant eating an ice cream. And this is someone who would have undergone hydrogen therapy, insulin therapy, electrotherapy. And in this single photo, just the look on his face, captures a mind that has had so much done to it, and it still has so much going on of its own accord. So it was very heavy. I mean, it's quite a heavy subject matter. But there were moments of levity in it when he meets Carl Jung, and it was a wonderful thing to do with Ralph Green as the writer. It was an absolute joy.
Okay, and speaking of heavy, Sam, you really had a part that was based on a composite.
Yeah, so it was a bit different to these guys in terms of it wasn't necessarily a real person, but as Peter wrote this, it's an amalgamation of people's experiences that have really happened. So yeah, I mean, in a similar vein, I did feel a huge responsibility, totally, because representing a group of people and a kind of subgroup of people, and it's such a sensitive story anyway, going out to Syria to fight for the Islamic State, that I had to make sure the preparation and everything was really intensely studied. And so when we came to do the shoot, it was like, we felt like we were really part of telling a really important story. And so making sure that it was all there and ready to go was so important. Yeah.
And Carolyn, I just want to touch on you. I want to come back to you, obviously, before we run some trailers here. 3 very different scripted content here. How do you choose? What did you want to achieve this season, last season?
I think for us, and Courtney touched on it in her keynote, we look for a bunch of different qualities in our shows that I think all of these shows possess. The first is, as Courtney said, that they're fact-based or fact-inspired and feel really authentic. Most of the projects that we have greenlit so far are based on a big underlying, nonfiction book. So we have great source material to draw from. In the case of The State, it was tons and tons of research that Peter was drawing from. But we want to make sure that everything, in order for it to be brand relevant to the Nat Geo brand, is fact-based. The second thing we look for is stories that are globally relevant and that have some sense of urgency to them, that shine a light on something that's happening in the world that feels important for the world to know, that we think is a story that you may know a little something about, you may have read about it in the newspaper in the case of The Long Road Home or The State, or with Einstein, you may know a little bit about Albert Einstein. You may know E equals MC squared. You may know that photograph of him sticking out his tongue as an old man in Princeton, but you don't know the complete story. And we're always looking for stories where the truth is stranger and more extraordinary and fascinating than fiction. And I think with all 3 of these stories, we've certainly found that in spades. So those are some of the qualities that I think we look for and that unite these 3 very different stories.
Carolyn talked about the research, you talked about the research. So when we look at this, when we look at The State, how much is based on reality? I mean, I, for one, know how hard it is to get people to talk who've survived the Islamic State if they tried to join. So how did you do that, and what's true?
The characters are composites, but every incident depicted in the 4 hours of the show is true. I didn't make up any event. And the characters are fictional only to the extent that they're composites of a series of real people. And that's actually to try to broaden the range of things that we can see through their eyes in the show. So we are setting out to try to make it as realistic as we can within the limitations of the medium. Television is an essentially trivializing medium. If you think of what you can write in a broadsheet newspaper compared with what we...
Not anymore at National Geographic. It's not trivialized.
Okay. Generally speaking, we struggle to deal with complex ideas in television, but at the same time, we have this enormous reach. Millions and millions of people watching the show, often simultaneously or semi-simultaneously. That still has an incredible power, even in this multi-channel universe. So you have to use it responsibly, and you have to make sure that the impression you're creating isn't misleading.
And Sam, your character joins ISIS and then has a change of heart, which does happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, that was really fascinating for me because this idea of somebody who's innately good plunged into this kind of horrifying situation, and what happens when this good guy is confronted with this stuff. And it was about a sense of kind of naivety, I think, going there, putting things to the back of his mind, and it being more about duty and honor than anything else. And then once there, it's he tries to save everybody he can ultimately, and ends up going down this kind of this tragic route. And yeah, it was profound, the fact that it's based on true stories. It blew my mind. And that was, again, this whilst we were doing it, it was important to kind of keep your head focused, keep your mind focused, because it would be very, very easy, I think, for it to become very heavy, but it was important that we kind of just forgot didn't get too stuck in the kind of politic of it to tell these human stories.
Could I just say, because it is important to say it, that this was an incredibly difficult show to get financed. Channel 4 came in Britain, but the days of fully financing by a UK broadcaster are long gone. And I'm sorry if it sounds like a bit of an advert, but without National Geographic being brave enough to take on what was a really difficult subject, this show would not have been made. It was turned down almost everywhere. So we owe a huge debt, in terms of boring freedom of speech, to National Geographic for allowing something that is not obviously commercial, it's not easily going to put bums on seats to get made. And I'll always be grateful for that.
And it adds great depth to everyone's understanding. I can certainly vouch for that. I want to move on to The Long Road Home, which I was closely associated with during this period. And let's take a look at the trailer for The Long Road Home. And I think you can see from that there is emphasis on the front line, and there is emphasis on the home front. That was certainly part of the book, but you really took that beyond the book in ways Peter talks about too. I mean, there were so many characters in the book, there's so much depth you can add in a book, but both of you added such extraordinary depth on both those fronts.
Yeah, it was fascinating. I really wanted, what I found so unique about your book is that it really wasn't just a story about what it's like to go to war for the very first time as a soldier, but for the military family, which I think it is a really universal and timeless story. And I really wanted to get to know the people. You had about 60 soldiers and families you get to know quite well in the book, but you can't really do that in a television series. So I always knew that we wanted to choose different points of view. We have 8 main characters who represent different levels of command, and I wanted our cast to be, really give a complete picture of what different soldiers went through. At the same time, it was very important that we show the Iraqi side, I think we have a responsibility for people to understand not just what happened, but why it happened. So we tell that story in large part by making the interpreter in the unit, Jassim, who Darius plays in the show, a main character, because it was important to me, too, that even as we look at this rather dark and tragic day, one of the storylines that we tell on both sides is both the Americans and the Iraqis who are trapped in this circumstance that they haven't made start to recognize the inherent humanity of the person on the other side. And we tell that in Jassim's story with...
And I will say that, Miko, this is not part of the interpreter is certainly in the book, and I know the interpreter well, but at the time, the book was written at the time, certainly the battle, you could not possibly go into Sadr City and interview the people who I wanted to interview as well, because it was far too dangerous.
Yeah, but we wanted to create much, as Peter said, composited different experiences that are all real into the characters so that we could, impart an understanding to the audience about what had happened the year before, how this insurgency was born, and what the grievances were.
And Michael, I want to talk to you. Actually, can we introduce, Miko, the other members of the cast we have here, and our North Star, Eric Berkwin?
Yes, we have Eric Berkwin, both John Beavers, who plays Eric, and the real-life Eric with us. And then Darius Hummingen, who plays Jassim, the interpreter. Hi, guys.
You do a fantastic job, both of us. And Eric really guided us as a technical consultant who was one of those platoon members who was ambushed.
If I may say this too, it's an extraordinary thing to be able to tell a real story with the intimate participation of the people who lived through it. And Eric was, not only helped us sort of understand minute by minute what happened, but was on set, helped us get down every smallest detail of configuration of the radios in the Humvees. And it's just extraordinary, you never get to do that really as a writer. And we had other soldiers, other family members who we consulted as our guides and teachers to try to tell this story for the first time the way it really is for ordinary soldiers and their families.
And Michael, talk about that. And just doing a series like this, having Eric Berkwin around, and what it meant to you. I know the cast and crew and all of us have created a sort of bond, much like a Band of Brothers bond, but I really have felt throughout this that it means a great deal to you.
Yeah, it does. I mean, first of all, to touch lightly on Eric and the other soldiers that we had with us, as an actor, you can do only so much research. You can only read so much. You can only watch so much. But when you have the real men who, Eric was there, and from something as simple as like, okay, I know how to hold a rifle, I know how to fire a rifle, I know how to clear a room, but it's like, I was like, oh man, how do I get in the Humvee with this, like the right way? How do you come out of the Humvee, and how do you do it? And to have those guys there that were just so willing to give to us, to give that information to us, to give the experience to us and the stories and everything that they had. All you wanted to do was make it as authentic as possible to represent these men who literally go out there and put their lives on the line for us on a daily basis so that I can go have fun playing cops and robbers as an actor. It's really, they fight for your freedom to do what you want to do in life. All you want to do is represent those guys.
And when we see you on the home front as well, I mean, that is such a powerful message in this, and that they're in combat mode themselves, and your scenes on the home front are really capture that.
Yeah, and to hear Gary Valesky talk about his wife and call her the real hero. It's these women who stay home and don't know if their husbands are coming back. Or it's just so, you want to do them right. You want to do them right.
And he did do them right. They all did. And I want to conclude here, as we're running out of time, with looking at a quick trailer from Genius, Season 1. Eugene, we learned so much about Einstein in this, and you talked a little bit about your character, but was there anything incredibly surprising to you as you were shooting this? Besides maybe the 10 Emmy Award nominations that they...
I think that was a wonderful surprise. Really, the parts of Einstein's life that you do find so interesting is, rather almost normally with some of those enormous characters, you don't think much of their personal life. You think their personal life will be so revealed because they are such well-known figures. But to understand how a man like Albert Einstein, who first married Mileva Maric, had these two boys, Hans Albert and Eduard, and then went on to marry Elsa Einstein, his cousin, and then go on to move to found the IRC, the International Rescue Committee, in '43, which is still active today in helping Syrian refugees. I could go on forever giving random sort of bits of fact that accumulate the greater character of this man. And I think one of the things that I feel so strongly that I have to add to is, whether you're performing as a character or you're watching as a viewer, the level of authenticity as a form of storytelling that National Geographic, Ron Howard, Brian Grazer, Ken Biller, but as a network, National Geographic really gives is just extraordinary. It's something that I've never, as having been very, very fortunate to be on a show like Game of Thrones, which has such specific imaginative details in a fantasy world, to feel that the enormity of that world can still be incorporated into a series of real-life historical events and be just as detailed and nuanced and intriguing and explorative and revealing is just wonderful. And so, for me, I hope I'm doing it justice. But it to me, 10 out of 10. For me, I I just found that as the character Edward Einstein, it was very, very interesting to be a young man that was seeing Albert from the perspective that he was, which is a young man that was neglected and felt that this is someone who had really done wrong by him, because it showed a side to Albert Einstein that most people will never really be able to see unless they watch it. So I think it's a beautiful show, and it deserves full marks.
And Carolyn, you go from Einstein, as Courtney said, to Pablo Picasso. First of all, when you first did this, did you know that genius would have a second act there? And why did you go from Einstein to Pablo Picasso? Why did you choose him?
Sure. We did envision it as an anthology series pretty much from the get-go. We weren't sure who our subject would be for season 2, but we thought it had legs and was something that we could repeat across many seasons. And the trick is finding the right subject. So why Picasso? Like Albert Einstein, I think he really fits into a similar model of someone that we all know a little bit about. You may know his famous painting Guernica. You may know Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, if I can speak a little French here.
Which she does.
You may know that he had a very tumultuous romantic life across his 90 years, but no one has yet dramatized the complete picture, and you can't do it justice in 2 hours. We're doing it across 10 hours as we did for Einstein. It was a full, rich, complicated life. He was obviously a creative genius, which is different than a scientific genius, but similar to the Einstein story, we're trying to get to the heart of the question of what conditions needed to be present to make his genius really fully flower. And the answer in the case of Picasso had a lot to do with his romantic relationships, which provided tremendous inspiration, but also he would grow tired of some of his romances and then required new inspiration, and so would move on to the next romance, sometimes juggling several at once, in fact, often juggling several at once. So a rich, complicated personal life like Einstein had, and true genius in terms of him teaching all of us how to see the world differently than anyone had ever seen it before. He was a true innovator. So I think many of the same qualities are shared by both shows, but we thought it would be a good kind of statement about what we're doing in Scripted to pivot from a scientific genius to an artistic genius. To our way of thinking, exploring creative genius is just as worthy and fascinating and complex as exploring scientific genius. So we're really excited about Picasso. And I want to mention we're shooting in Malaga, Barcelona, Paris, and Budapest. So it should be absolutely beautiful, as Genius Season 1 was. We were primarily in Prague for Genius Season 1, but we're really all over Europe for Genius Season 2. And so, we're excited about Antonio. We're excited about all these beautiful places we're shooting. And it is a juicy, thrilling, really surprising, unpredictable story. So we start shooting in about a week, and we're planning on airing in the spring.
We can't wait. We can't wait for the long road home. We're very excited about that.
Yeah.
The state is amazing. Thank you to National Geographic. Thank you to all of you for coming. Thank you again. Okay, everybody rebound. Let's go.